Well met. This has been Brode, and you're watching Born to be
Cosmo.
Oh, snap.
Welcome to Born to be Cosmo, the podcast where we talk about all things Marvel Snap. Here with me today are my two co-hosts, Nate Wolfe, ZombiesGoNomNom, and despite Red Hulk appearing on our screen, they had to cancel at the last moment. So
Hulk smash.
yeah, so you're gonna have to put up just with three of us, but we have a lot to talk about since we met last. An OTA, some game-breaking bugs, and just some general thoughts and conversation on the game that still manages to captivate us. So I thought we would start by talking about the OTA and dive right in. Although before we do, I should acknowledge that while this month we're on track to hitting our twice monthly goal of podcasting, we are still leveraging our flexible podcasting schedule. And instead of a Saturday night, we're here on a Sunday afternoon, which is actually quite nice because, like, I don't have to turn on the lights because there's still daylight to illuminate me. So that's
we've had a series drop.
Yeah. Series drop in time.
Yep.
Yeah. What's a series drop? But what we did have was, I think I said an OTA earlier. That was a mistake. We had a patch. It was a full-on patch, and in this full-on patch, we got a number of balance changes that we're going to talk about. And I think the first one was a little unexpected, and I can't speak for the rest of you, but had me not feeling too psyched about it. So Alioth, as known by some in this podcast, was changed from a 6/2 on reveal, destroy all unrevealed cards at this location, to a 6/8, so big 6-point power buff on reveal. Rather than killing the unrevealed cards at that location, it simply makes their text blank. So, like, for example, if you have a big Hulk from High Evo, like a 620 Hulk, and Alioth pops up, it'll go back to being a 612 instead of getting nuked.
Does it actually do that? Does it retroactively take away buffs? I'm not entirely sure that it does.
Oh,
because it's like silent.
No, you're right.
I don't think it would work with the Hulk.
Okay, you're right.
But like
so
other text cards.
Bad example. Okay, so let's take Null for example. It will be a 6
Null would
instead
work.
of a 650. So this is even worse than I thought it was. And so I think there's two conversations to be had here with Alioth. One is was the change warranted, and is it still playable? That's a conversation. And then there's
a one-sentence conversation.
and then there's the other side of it, which is, even if it is still playable, and that's a big if, and we'll unpack that in a second. I mean, this card is nerfed twice and reworked, and I spent 6,000 tokens on it, and it feels kind of bad.
Their crybabies won.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Hey, if one positive thing came out of it, the meme stonks around Alioth were doing numbers. I made many a post, and man, there was a lot of reaction. And one of the I think the dumbest things I've heard from some people is like, well, everyone hated this card, guys, but now you're seeing, well, it turns out not everyone hated this card, because there are a lot of people who aren't really happy Alioth has been moved to the island of misfit toys here with Zabu and Darkhawk and Leech.
Because these cards cost so much, like, we're not getting tokens anymore. I mean, 100 tokens here and there is a pittance, right? I get more tokens from, like,
it takes a couple months to get 6K.
I get more tokens from buying variants than from anything else, which is ridiculous, right? And to spend 6K tokens on a card that, like, you really wanted and was really cool, and then just to have it turned to a steaming pile of doggy doo, like, it feels really bad. And this whole no refunds policy, like, at least in Hearthstone you get your dust back. Here it's like, oh, too bad, so sad. Like,
no, you have to keep the bad card and then hope we make it better again someday. That's their philosophy.
And because they encourage you to split your cards and buy variants and stuff, it's like, cool, I've got variants for this card. I've split it a few times, and like, so glad I did that for a card that's like not going to see the light of day unless they fix it, because this change is bad.
But they should have made it so it removes the text from Alioth in your collection, because that'd be a more accurate representation of what they did to the card. Like, it's just really, really bad. You can use it specifically to try and hose combo, and I've seen so many people like be like, no, guys, he still has an application. Don't jump the gun. And here's the thing. This card does next to nothing against a ton of different decks. So the opportunity cost of running it in your deck is really high, because I don't know about you, but I'm not trying to play an Odin in my non-on reveal deck. That's essentially what Alioth is in the matchups where the text doesn't do anything. I think if they wanted to make this change, which I don't think they ever should have done to begin with, but let's say they wanted to, this should have been a 5-drop. They should have made it a 5-drop, because I could get behind a 5/8 doing this. I still wouldn't like the change. I still wouldn't really be supportive of the change, but at least there's I think a better argument to it being an interesting card as a 5/8 compared to a 6/8. When it's taking up your whole final turn, it's just really hard to justify putting this card in a deck. And the cherry on top of the cake here is that this card really wasn't super dominant. I mean, it was a good card. It got played in some decks, specifically Lockdown, which wasn't really doing very well. And it was very prominent before the Thanos nerf. But after the Thanos nerf, I don't know about you guys, I was not seeing this card at all.
Barely. I think I saw it maybe once or twice.
Like, sometimes you catch a stray destroy running it instead of Shang in that, or Zola in that one tech spot. But it was really not that common of a card to see. And one of the things that really annoys me about it, and this is like a rebuttal to all the people who are like, oh, you just liked playing this card and getting free wins with it. It's like, well, one, this card was very much not always a free win, because you have to spend the whole game setting up a position to win. But I liked playing around this card. I think beating quote unquote Alioth brain it was one of the most satisfying things in Snap. You make your opponent think they're going to get you with the card, and then you find a way to outmaneuver them. That was great. That was fun. It was skill testing.
And there was a risk to playing it too, because it was a low powered card, like 6/2. So you're really committing to that line of nuking the lane
and not doing anything else, right? Like,
exactly.
That's your whole turn. And now with things with Move being a popular deck, with like Silk, Doom, Vision, there are quite a few cards that move around the board and can get into that lane and flip that lane. It's just it's very ridiculous to me that this is what they thought to do with it. And I don't think it's going to be the permanent text for the card. Like, I think when it's time for them to sell it again, they're going to try and make it more compelling. But this is essentially them like pseudo rotating a card out. They're like, all right, we're going to see what the game is like without this for a bit. And when it's time for us to sell it to you again, we're going to, maybe go back to the drawing board and try and make him more compelling, because nobody's going to open Spotlight caches for this piece of crap.
They Galactus it. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And Galactus, it's so funny. Like, Galactus has not been good in a long time, but he sure is worse now. like they took his win condition away. So now if you're Galactus, you're probably gonna lose a lot more, because you're just gonna get, if you play a big thing, you're gonna get shanged most likely, which is far more popular than Alioth has ever been. But no, that's okay. This is a ridiculous change.
But zombies, it feels so bad when someone plays Alioth against me. I lose, and I'm just gonna cry and go complain on Twitter and Discord.
It's crazy. Like, I get why people dislike it. It's also, maybe most importantly, this is like a lore lose. Like, the lore on Alioth was actually really good. It literally deleted everything. That's what it did in the show.
A big old black hole. Yeah.
Like, it doesn't leave the character there without their ability. It murders them. Like, they're gone.
I don't like Shang-Chi. Can we get rid of Shang-Chi?
Yeah.
So here's something that's interesting, and I'm gonna put this in the chat, and maybe you want to put it up on screen, Nate. I should have sent this to you earlier, so my apologies.
All good.
So despite the nerf hitting the card really hard, it's still seeing a significant amount of play, which I think is weird.
That is
So
really weird because I sure
yeah,
haven't been
the
seeing
win rate, has plummeted.
I'll tell you why
Um,
you're seeing a lot
surprising.
of play rate. It's because they're really bad at communicating, and people still don't realize that it's changed. There you go.
Oh,
Or
you might
people are coping
or
too.
people are coping, but like I'll give you some cards that have higher win rates than Alioth. Spider-Ham, Deathlock, Shadow King, Nightcrawler, Debris. I'm not gonna list them all.
Yeah, we'd be here
Like
for a while.
they have higher cube rates and win rates. And when I say win rate, I'm talking about drawn win rate, not played win rate, because that played win rate, especially for a
It's a bait
closer,
stat. Yeah.
is not meaningful. To put it in perspective, though, I mean 6% is high, but like cards like Red Hulk are at 37%, as is
Jeez.
Shang. Hope is at 22. Magneto's at 17. So it certainly has dropped, but I mean, it's not like Silver Samurai, which is a 1.1%, or Electro, which is 4.8. Well, Electro is a little bit lower. But yeah, I find it interesting. You could be right, Nate. It could be like a residual or knock-on effect, and we'll have to see how that develops. But either way, the win rate, if the win rate and the cube rate are any indicator, the popularity is going to see decrease over time.
Yeah, I can't imagine we're going to see it go up from here. There's just
not a
and-
chance. It's so bad. It's so
Yeah.
bad.
It's very bad stats. The effect is very situational. Like there are certain things you can beat with it, sure, but the opportunity cost of putting this in your deck is so incredibly high now. It's like it's what I like to call a flat Earth tech card, and it's basically like Super Scroll. People put this
No, this isn't as Super Scroll is still is stupider card than this. Although
No,
this
but the
card's pretty.
concept is the same. It's the card actively makes your deck worse in more scenarios than it doesn't. But the
Right.
scenarios where
Okay,
it
all right.
doesn't make people feel really good and smart about using a card that is on average making their deck perform worse. And so they'll lose more because of it, but they won't remember those losses, and they will remember the time where they hit the Wong Surfer lane with it and got like 4 or 8 cubes, right? And there's an argument to be like, yeah, it's cool having the element of surprise. I get that. But like, think when you look across the spectrum of like the variety of decks you're running into, you're going to find less decks care about this kind of effect hitting them than decks that don't care. And it just, especially now when we're in a meta where there are a lot of stat sticks, particularly Red Hulk is a common turn 6 play. Yeah, you don't care if you Alioth the Red Hulk. The Red Hulk still is going to smash. So it's this is just, I think, one of the least inspiring changes they've ever done.
I hate it.
It feels like they're intentionally trying to kill this card.
If you read the patch notes, like they pretty much said that they do it because it feels bad. Like,
yeah, boohoo.
No, I mean, so I'm looking at them right now. It says,
Yeah.
It's been hugely effective in creating more tension on turn 6, but the in-game effect can also be really frustrating. Losing your cards completely, no questions asked, is very powerful. We're sensitive to that, so as we monitored Alioth, we've also thought about other ways we could implement the card. Like, okay, it has nothing to do. They don't mention the play rate. They don't mention the win rate. They don't mention anything except
Yeah, because it wasn't an outlier, and they know
No.
it wasn't an outlier. It's ridiculous. It's a very, very dumb change. That it makes the game less complex to it. That's like something I really want to hammer home, is they keep pushing the game to be less complex and less interesting.
No, it's all like stat. It's just who can drop the big stats now.
Biggest stats or biggest combo, and there legitimately is almost no reason to fight for priority in this game now. We're kind of back to like the bounce meta style of things where generally it is more beneficial to throw priority so you do not get interacted with. You could say, oh, but armor and Cosmo, and to that I would say, how many times have you seen an armor or a Cosmo in the last like 6 months? I think I can count on 2 hands. Like the old cards that used to be like counters, they aren't run as much because they're not as effective versus a lot of this stuff. And it really is just like, I think, dumbing down the game. They're trying to make the game simpler and basically getting rid of this card so it's no longer good at what it was doing, which is encouraging you to fight for priority and get ahead in multiple lanes. That's an easy way to dumb down the game.
Well, sounds like all 3 of us are not too happy about this change. I'm sure there are some folks out there who are. So to them, I say, congrats.
Enjoy it while it lasts.
Right, because I think this next card kind of shows that, and I really like how you characterize the zombies, that they've almost solved for their never rotating cards problem by using balance as a means of soft rotation. So if we think of that and look at Zabu, the change totally makes sense. Another left field change. Zabu has been seeing less play recently, mainly due to the fact that Hope Summer is really strong, and that kind of pushes a different kind of package in your deck with Kitty and Hope Summers. Zabu went from being a 2/2 ongoing, your 4-cost cards cost 1 less, to being a 2/3 buff, by the way, changing that ongoing to an on reveal for next turn only, effectively killing this card. They Mobiused it. But also more impactful than Mobius are the 4-cost cards that were only fringe playable because of Zabu. Great example is Werewolf by Night, but also to a lesser extent, nerfed Miss Marvel.
A lot of the 4-drops aren't seeing as much play anymore. Like, I was going through the 4s, and it's like, there's not a compelling reason to run a lot of 4s. And they said in the patch notes, essentially, their justification for, I mean, I don't think they're surprised that this completely kills Zabu. They're like, yeah, we want to see what 4-drops look like without Zabu. And spoiler alert, I think 4-drops without Zabu are generally really bad, is what it has seemed like.
With an exception of Shang-Chi.
Yeah, Shang-Chi, you could say like the 4/10s are okay, like Call and Sentry.
The stat dump ones are good. Enchantress is still good, but like
most of the other ones are not.
I'm an Enchantress truther. I think that it's seeing no play outside of my deck.
Because ongoings aren't that popular. I mean,
I don't know, man. I still see them all the time. Tribunal's really common. Decks with Iron Man are common. I need it for opposing Mobiuses, which are less common but still relevant.
Yeah, he's died down since the Thanos nerf, but sometimes you run into him. Like, it's still a good tech card for sure. But yeah.
Yeah, but I'm probably like coping a little bit there, as I am a famous cope gamer. But the point is that it's a soft rotation out, and it's ironic that another card was kind of rotated, quote unquote, back in, which we'll get to. So Nate's summary of this change is doing the same thing over, in reference to Mobius, and expecting a different result is the definition of insanity. You're going to tweet this, Nate, yes?
Sure.
It's pretty good.
I mean, it just made me think of it because Zombies was saying like they Mobiused it, and they did, and remember how bad that was to the point where they changed it.
The only
difference, a little bit of riot on their hands.
The only difference here is that instead of mentioning the phrase that I think defines Marvel Snap, temporary play environment, I think they learned their lesson to not directly tell people, hey, your cards are going to be changing all the time. Like, so instead they were like, hey, Zabu fans, we're doing this experiment, and he'll probably be back later. They tried to soften the blow, be like, yeah, I know you guys are thinking we're deleting this card, and we are, but it's not a permanent deletion. He'll be back at some point in time. Just hope you're still playing the game at that point, because it could be a month from now. It could be 6 months from now. Your guess is as good as ours.
Unky Broad and Glenn killed the kitty.
Mm-hmm. It's what they did to like Kitty, Angela, Elsa, right? Like they rotated those cards out for like
Yeah, and now they're back.
half a year or something, and now they're
Yeah,
back.
it's been a long time, and man, I tried so hard to get Angela to work. I was playing it in a couple decks, and it's so freaking bad.
She's good
Anyways,
in move right now in that
Yeah,
well,
she's
too.
great
yeah,
now. She's like one
she's
of the best
great
2-drops in the
everything.
game again.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I
So
think that's
no,
just
yeah,
what they're
yeah.
gonna do. Is they're just gonna this is gonna become a more regular thing where they're gonna be
yeah,
doing quote unquote pseudo rotation, where it's like, all right, this card has had its time to shine for a while. Let's take it out back and shoot it, and then we'll hit it with the defibrillators in a couple months.
Thanks, I hate it.
all right, so let's keep going. Yeah, I hate this change too.
It just
Zero,
the big thing
0 and 10.
I want to drive home that annoys me about this and the Alioth change is they didn't do anything to make the metagame or the play experience more interesting.
That's true.
All it did was it took decks away from people without actually giving people more things to experiment. Like this didn't open up space in the metagame because these cards weren't defining the metagame. This didn't open up a new way for you to play or build around these cards. You're just using a worse version of what you had previously, and so much worse that a lot of these decks aren't really super viable anymore. I mean, the Black Knight kind of Zabu
Yeah,
stuff
true.
that is just dead in the water because it needed Zabu's old effect.
The
Lockdown decks seem
yeah.
really bad now. Like it just all it did was, and we were in a pretty diverse metagame. I mean, there's a lot of there. It still is diverse, but they just took decks away from people without giving you anything new or interesting to do with these cards or opening up more space for other cards to work better because these are not as good as they were. And that's why I think there has been such a negative reception to this patch, is because people don't like that. People don't like when you do change for the sake of change and it doesn't actually encourage more diversity or experimentation. And then it's just these changes didn't do that.
Yeah. The next change also was a bit unexpected. So Sandman went from being a 5/4 ongoing to a 5/7 on reveal, where it only will affect the next turn only. So if you play it on turn 4, like if you ramped it out, it'll then have its effect on turn 5, and turn 6 you can go back to playing cards. I think in this case, like generally speaking, Sandman was like you needed it. You needed to get 2 turns out of it, or like the tempo loss from a 5/4 was just too much. Whereas now there's kind of like this is less frustrating than the Zabu change, but like it's also weird because like they're fundamentally
It
using
changes
just
the deck you want to run
yeah,
Sandman in, because before the only way you
yeah,
played Sandman was you ramped him out on 4, and if you didn't get him out on 4, he wasn't very good most of the time. But I like the new Sandman a lot. Like, as much as I dislike the first 2 changes, the second 2 changes are 2 of my more enjoyed changes they've done in a while. Because Sandman reminds me of what I liked about Old Wave, which was you limit your opponent to 1 card on the final turn in the game. You can spend, your early turns setting up to be ahead. Sandman kind of encourages that. You play him, you make it so it's hard for your opponent to play cards, and then you try and win the game. And it's cool. Like, I actually really like the Sandman change because I think that's more interesting to build around than
yeah,
play ramp cards, play Sandman on 4, play 1 big card a turn. It kind of has brought back a bit of like the move style deck that used to run Wave. Although sadly, with the arrow change, arrow doesn't really work with that anymore, which makes me sad. But I like the idea of what they're trying to do with this card, and I think it makes it a more interesting card to play around with. But I mean, I do think it is a little sad for the people who really liked getting Sandman out early just for like the restriction. And apparently, from what I heard, that deck was like crazy overrepresented on the Asia server. Like,
oh yeah.
people were playing a ridiculous amount of the Sandman ramp before this
Why?
change. I don't know. I mean, I think it was just doing well. It was like the Hella version, but did the big ramp Sandman stuff. But I've heard from people who play on that server that it was crazy popular. But I don't think that has anything to do with why they made this change or anything, because this was also a patch change. So it's worth noting this was locked in like a month ago, right? Before the change actually hit. So yeah, Sandman change I think is kind of an interesting change that encourages more interesting like build around deck building stuff than the original Sandman did. And it's also kind of fun to use with leader again. I have enjoyed that a bit.
Well, the next change was another surprising one and a fairly significant
Best
buff.
change.
Best change? Well,
Best change of the patch, I would say.
Of the patch, I agree.
I like this.
There was one change I liked better than this one, but yeah, Lady Deathstrike went from being a 5/4 that as an on reveal killed everything with less power at the location than Lady Deathstrike to being a 5/7 and having that destruction being set to 3 or less. So we get a bigger body and a more consistent effect. This card is kind of spooky now.
It's really cool. Like Lady Deathstrike was one of those cards where when it came out it seemed so bad, and it was so bad because they had to buff it. If you will remember, I believe, wasn't she a 5/3 when she came out? I think she was a 5/3 when she came out. They played it very safe with Lady Deathstrike, and then they buffed her to a 5/4, and she still wasn't very good. And you could do some funny stuff with her. Like I remember playing her in a negative deck where you could flip her and flip Shuri and do some fun things, but it was pretty much always a meme.
You had to combo it. You had to Shuri
yeah, you had to
it
find a way to
or
buff her,
forge it or something like that.
and that made you overcommit so much. It was hard to put power in other lanes, and then your opponent could play around that by not stacking one lane. So it was just a hard card to use. I found like a tempo kind of destroy deck I really enjoyed with her. I mean, she was never insane or anything, but it was cool as like an element of surprise card. But definitely one of the biggest issues the card had was they kind of like were compensating for the fact that you're gonna blow stuff up, so we have to have her not have a ton of power, and especially when her ability was tied to that. I think even if they made her old version a 5/5 instead of a 5/4, it would have been a pretty scary card because blowing up 4s is a way bigger range than 5 or but than 3s.
Right.
So I think this was a good way to change it where they're like, this is what we want this card to do. We want it to blow up cards that are 3 or less power, but now you're actually getting some bodies on the board while doing it. I think this is a card people would have loved, like, I don't know, a couple months ago or way back remember when everyone used to be asking for the Dracula counter? Oh, you can't interact with Dracula. You can't interact with Dracula. And it's like, boom, you can now interact with Dracula very effectively. And I've gotten a few big cube gains from that. But this is like, this and Sandman, I think, were both really positive changes where they give you, it's like the opposite of the Zabu and Alioth stuff, where this is what you want out of a change. You want people to have a new reason to explore building around a card.
Yeah.
And I think both of those changes really did give people a reason to explore building stuff. So I really liked what it did to the Deathstrike deck I had. And I also tried out another one recently, bringing back Black Bolt and Stature, which are cards I haven't played in a very long time. Probably since like the original nerfs to those cards or something. But it was cool and surprisingly effective, putting in Black Bolt Stature, the Zemo mill package kind of stuff. And it was neat because you're stealing cards from your opponent, you're ripping cards from their hand, and then Deathstrike is killing cards on the board. And it's a very cool dynamic. So this change, I don't think anyone expected it. And I think it was, in my opinion, the best change of the patch. I really like it.
Yeah, I agree. I've been trying it in Destroy, and it's been fun.
Yeah, you can definitely run it in Destroy now, too. Like, Destroy always has that one spot for tech, and Deathstrike is reasonable in that spot. Snipe a Mobius that's stopping your death. Snipe a Dracula. Snipe a whole lane of swarms. Like, well, it just hits a lot of things.
Because it kills your own stuff also. Like, it's good if you're playing against junk, or it's good if you're playing it.
Oh, yeah.
You know, if they give you the sentry, like the void, right?
Yep. You can even use it with your own sentry and blow up the void. Like, yeah. I've done that where they think I'm gonna send the void over, so they clog their lane, and then you just use Deathstrike to destroy the void and some of their cards.
Yeah,
it's really cool.
It'll kill your Wolverine, I guess, depending on how big it is, but it'll kill your X-23, so you get the extra mana bump. Like, I don't know, it's been pretty good.
It's just a solid card now, and it comes to Spotlight Caches next week, so if you're one of the people who didn't own Lady Deathstrike and want to try her out, the timing kind of works out decently well.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Well, the next card was another odd change. Strong Guy, basically 3/3 plus 6 power when you have no cards in your hand. Now will activate its ongoing when you have one or fewer cards in your hands. So a pretty sizable buff, I suppose you might say.
Yeah, he's a lot stronger. That's for sure. It's just like this is now a card you can consider in traditional discard. He's kind of like in some cases he'll be better than Dakin. Where you can it's a 3/9, right? Where if you discard your stuff and your last card's Apocalypse, that can be pretty good. Strong Surfer, that does sound fun. I haven't seen that one. But yeah, you could put him in a Surfer deck. I mean, I was playing a Surfer deck with like some discard stuff for Proxima. And yeah, I could see throwing Strong Guy in there because you want to discard your hand anyway. And 3/9s are pretty appealing. Like that's a good stat line. So it's nice to see a card like this that's been kind of by the wayside continue to be tweaked to try and be playable.
Yeah, this is the type of change that I like to see. A card that sees 0 play and then finally, hey, maybe worth checking out. Like,
yeah, if nothing else, it's interesting to experiment with.
Finally, the last change, my favorite change, and also frankly not really expected, was an Angela revert. So what Brode taketh from Zabu, we giveth in terms of a reintroduction to Angela, who has completely taken over the meta again.
Right.
Yeah, it went from being a 2/2 plus 1 to a 2/0 plus 2. And it's it's back and it's better than ever.
Yeah, fully agree. I didn't have a picture of this one on the balance card update, but yeah, the card has been fantastic. I've been playing Angela in that like silky smooth like move deck or whatever, and it's been phenomenal with Kitty and with the other stuff. So yeah, happy to get that one reverted. That like long time coming.
Right. So what's interesting is it was really bad as a 2/2. I tried to play it quite a bit, and it's just funny that the card went from being unplayable to
best
now being a meta tyrant. Yeah, best 2-drop in the game.
It's so good. I'm very surprised they went all the way back with Angela. I didn't think they would ever do that, but I'm very okay with it.
I don't know. I mean, I wonder what they look like. They see the metrics and see how poorly the card is. They're like, oh, we blew it. Let's fix. That's all.
It's also a case of like the smaller the numbers are, the harder it is to like they're less knobs, right? To change on the card because there's no number between 1 and 2 in Marvel Snap, right? So they couldn't be like, well, what if we made her a 2/1? But she buffs by 1.5. It's just they don't do that in this game, and that's actually something that reminds me kind of Mercenaries, where they also dealt with like small numbers. And I think they've talked about it somewhere before, where they want to have single numbers to keep it like easy to do the math and whatnot, which makes sense. But I do think there is an argument for like sometimes you wish you had a bit more range on these things so you could find like an in between. Like Surfer is doing pretty all right now, but for a long period of time Surfer was really really bad, and that changed from like 2 to 3, and as we've seen on other cards, 2 to 3 on cheaper cards is it's like a world of difference.
Yeah.
So sometimes you wish that there was like almost an in between number they could try out, because like 3 is too much, 2 is too little. I wish we could like meet halfway there, but unfortunately it just is hard to do that with cheaper cards, which is why I think they went with the full Angela revert, because thinking about how else to adjust that card, it's kind of hard, I think.
Yep.
So happy to see that, but also, while I was happy to see the Angela change, in terms of like the broader context, not so much. I don't know. It's kind of a hard thing to really to really qualify. But yeah, no, it's I don't know. I feel like this patch really left me kind of feeling ambivalent about things. I'm not upset. I feel like got some things in the form of Angela. Some of the changes were cool, like for Lady Deathstrike. The change to Zabu was kind of silly in my view. I don't know. Whatever. It's like I'm indifferent, I suppose.
Yeah, I don't know. Some of these changes, I'm just getting a little tired of them nuking cards, but
yeah, it's tricky. It's always going to clash with the whole like getting invested in a card, which is kind of what the game wants you to do, and
So
then drastically changing the card.
I don't generally like to engage with chat in real time, but friend of the show, Binks, kind of made an interesting
hey,
comment,
Binks.
and I actually want to respond to it because I
Yeah, it's a
feel like
good question.
I
You
have a
should
good
read it.
faith
Read it for
answer. Yeah,
the
I'm gonna
audio.
read it.
Yeah.
So Binks says that I'm kind of surprised hearing that no one thinks that Zabu opens up space for other decks. It has been one of the highest play rate cards for a very long time. And I felt it homogenized so many decks that already wants with Shang and another 4 to add a third 4 and Zabu. Maybe that's just my style of deck building, but I love seeing a meta develop without the go-to card for so many decks. Thoughts? So this is my response. My displeasure with the change doesn't invalidate the argument that you made. I agree with what you're saying. So the question then becomes, how do we tackle the design space issue in a card game? And I feel like every game, once it hits a certain point of maturity, has to figure out some way of rotating out cards to allow the new ones coming in to be impactful without there being like a Yu-Gi-Oh level of power creep. And what they're doing is they're basically rotating cards out and in, not for the sake of design, not for the sake of game balance, but for the sake of dealing with the problem of creating a space that allows new cards to come in. The problem isn't that they're doing this instead of rotation, because it's kind of 6.5 one the other. The problem is that, for example, in Hearthstone or Magic the Gathering, when cards are going to rotate out. Same with Pokemon. Whereas with this, it's like you find out on patch day, and it's kind of there's very little agency in that. So it's less the fact that, yeah, sure, was Zabu a problem? Probably. But here's the thing. I'm willing to bet that Zabu gets reverted back to what it was or something very similar some point between now and next year, just like how Angela went full circle as well. So I think that it's not the change specifically that gets me hot and bothered about it. It's more the larger kind of meta, no pun intended, as to the cycle of changes that are being made. So it's not the change, it's not the destination, it's why the change was made, how it was announced, how it was kind of done, and that kind of piece of it that I kind of look. I'm indifferent, so like I accept that this is how things are going to be, but I don't know, it just
I think the
doesn't.
timing makes a difference too in terms of general perception. Like, I think if this Zabu change happened like a month or two ago, I think there would be a lot more people happy about it because Zabu was more defining the game in the past, I don't know, 2 or 3 months.
But that doesn't change just because more people would be happy about it. It doesn't change the underlying kind of
No, it doesn't change like
problem.
why things are being done or what you talked about. But I do think in like, because I know there are quite a few people who are surprised by the response to Zabu, and I think the response is different because even though I definitely agree, Zabu, I think he made deck building less complex, and that is like a concerning thing for the long term. But I think it's a combination of one, he was less popular than he used to be, so people weren't like as annoyed with the card and weren't because they weren't seeing it as much. They didn't feel like they had to be making a Zabu deck. Whereas sometimes in the past, it felt like you were really handicapping yourself if you didn't put Zabu in certain styles of deck. So I think people were a little bit less annoyed with that. But I think also the severity of the change is why people are a bit upset. I think people would be much more receptive if they went a little lighter. Like I really much preferred the idea of, well, if the concerning part about Zabu is, the powerful playing 2/4s on 6, which that was kind of the big thing about Zabu, right? Like it was nice to play a 4 on 3, but I think most of these Zabu decks really liked playing 2/4s on 6. So I would have liked to see them get that out of the equation, but still leaving it as an ongoing card. Your first 4 costs 1 less. I think that would have been a much more palatable change because you could still see what the game looks like without Zabu enabling 2 4s on 6. But you would still have a much more playable card than the version we have here, which really just seems like kind of like a big Psylocke for Mr. Negative now. Like, I found it very difficult to find a compelling reason to want to play this card. And I think that's really the frustration is like, because this really, I think, just like really dumpstered a lot of decks people enjoyed playing. And it is difficult to like play those same decks without Zabu. So people feel like they lost something, and it's kind of, there isn't really something to replace a lot of those decks. At
Well,
least from
not
what I
yet.
see.
The
Not
card,
yet, yeah.
yeah, those will be released in the upcoming months, right? So, it's
Or
really
when
hard.
Zabu comes back, like,
Yeah, it's hard not to be cynical about it, but I hope you're right. I hope
I'm
that it
curious
does
what they're
open
gonna
up
do
space.
with 4s though, because in the patch notes they said the whole point of this is they're trying to figure out. So like 3s had it kind of rough for a while, and some still do, but I think most people can agree 3 drops have gone a bit better over time. But 4s are in this really weird space where a lot of 4s are quite bad. Some were just propped up by Zabu, and really the prominent ones that are still seeing play post Zabu, it's like you have Shang-Chi, and you have like the big ones. I mean, there are some other ones that are seeing like more fringe play, but it's really hard to justify a lot of these 4s. So it'll be interesting to see what they learn from this and how that might impact 4 drops in the future. Because I think without Zabu, 4s are kind of quickly becoming one of the weakest spots on the curve. Like 5s usually have a very 5s and 6s have like the more powerful effects because it's limited how many of those you can play.
Mm-hmm.
3s, you have like the surfer synergy. 3s have gotten bigger over time, whereas like there are 3s that are bigger than 4s now. And you can still weave like a 1 drop in or weave some cheaper things in, 2 3s on the final turn. So I mean, if this ends up making more interesting 4 drops in the long term, that would be cool. But I hope they eventually find a better space for Zabu, because I don't think the current iteration is just a very fun card to play. It doesn't strike me as a card I actually want to put in my deck with 4 drops.
I think that they've designed themselves into a corner here because this one card per week, like release, trickle, and not wanting to rotate any, like that's what limits the design space more than anything. I mean, I'd rather have them rotate, like actually rotate cards than like nerf them to oblivion, and maybe
And
they come
that's
back and
that
maybe they
lack of
don't.
certainty, right? I think that's really what frustrates a lot of people is like you just have to look into the crystal ball to see what's going to happen, because there's really no knowing if one card that gets hit really hard will come back like Angela, or if it will forever stay as it is. It's really anyone's guess. There's usually not much like knowing about that. Sometimes they'll allude, like I think they did with Zabu and Darkhawk, where they're like, yeah, maybe they'll be back in the future, but you still don't really know. Like they could just as easily decide not to change them back if they're happy with where the new version stands. And I think that's what frustrates a lot of people, is the lack of certainty on a card they may be really invested in.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see how things shape up. Definitely, this balance patch certainly shook the meta up, and we're seeing some really interesting developments. I
It
think
is
that
pretty wide open. I mean, that's one thing I think
it's starting
generally
to
people can
narrow a
agree
little
on.
bit though. So like everyone was experimenting with the Angela package, Kitty, Angela, Elsa in a variety of decks.
Mm-hmm.
Lambie's day 1 tweet for Silky Smooth really caught on, both in terms of play and win rate, and at lower ranks, that's probably the best deck that one can pilot pre-infinite. Post-infinite, we're starting to see some things pretty interesting that non-interactive point decks are really starting to catch on. Phoenix Force, Tribunal, negative tribunal and just old plain negative, and everyone's out point slamming
Don't forget
each
Hella.
other.
That's a big one too.
And of course Hella, which kind of anchors that as the most consistent of them all. And those are really, really kind of rising to the top. Now, those decks generally are very glass cannony, so people can start teching against them, but we haven't seen that kind of third wave start. But it is kind of frustrating to see that. Yeah, it's nice that Angela's back, but a little bit frustrating how these kind of very tall, uninteractive point decks seem to be the ones that continue to be a mainstay in the meta. But before we get too far into the meta, I want to talk about something else that was very frustrating of a different kind. So this past week, we had the release of a new card, U.S. Agent.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought I couldn't remember if that
I know
was the
nobody
name.
can remember him.
Yeah,
because you aren't seeing him.
And Jeff came back, in Mirage. So 2 important cards for Loki, and Jeff just important for any deck. And of course, some people like the Jeff variant. It's okay.
Kaiju Jeff.
I love it, but I'm waiting for the Venom.
The Venomized, yeah. I wish it made it a little clearer he was really big. I felt like it was hard to tell. Like if you look close at the art, you can tell they're like buildings and stuff. But at a glance, I didn't realize it was like a kaiju with a giant Jeff. Because as a concept, that's really cool. I didn't even notice it until like someone pointed it out to me.
Yeah, probably will get Venomized Jeff. I'm not a fan of the Venomized variants, but that one's kind of like.
I think it's Peach from Loco. The art is out
Peach
there.
from Loco, and the art is
cool.
amazing.
It's really good.
So anyways, people opened up their spotlights and they didn't get what they expected to get out of them. And very quickly, this became, it wasn't just a one-off. This was happening to a lot of people, although not everyone. Spotlights were then disabled, and then compensation was announced for those that were impacted by this. Compensation was announced for the broader gaming community, and it has started a very interesting dialogue. So the thing that a lot of people's reaction was, well, I didn't exploit the bug right away, so I'm not getting full compensation, so I'm getting punished. But here's what I think is really interesting. Not everyone that opened their spotlights were necessarily going to be impacted by this bug. One had to do something very specific the week prior. They had to open up a certain amount of spotlights. I don't remember the parameters exactly.
Yeah, so I believe it was, I've seen a bunch of people talking about it. It has something to do with having opened the prior week, and that essentially kind of rolled over to this week in a way, and it messed with the opening. So like for me, for example, I did not open for Red Hulk. I purchased it with tokens. So I thought, do I open while this is a thing and risk it being bugged and getting compensation? And I was like, well, I don't really want any of the things here, so I'm not going to risk it because I didn't know how good compensation would be. Yeah. And looking back at that, I'm like, oh, I made the right choice because I wouldn't have been affected by the bug. I would have got, what was essentially advertised, but I didn't want that stuff if I actually had to use keys for it. So
I too made the right choice for a different reason. Unlike you, I did use keys to open up Red Hulk, and it took 4. And apparently, for 4 keys on Red Hulk that week, you wouldn't get the bug. Okay. So if you opened up Red Hulk in fewer like than 4, then you would get the bug. I could be wrong on the specifics. I know that there were kind of 2 kind of conditions for it, but the point is that if you saw that people were bugging out and you're like, oh, they're going to compensate, you jumped in and you opened and you didn't get impacted by the bug, you're not going to get compensation, which is to get your spotlight keys refunded and keeping what you opened. General compensation that everyone's going to get, and when I say everyone, I should be a little bit more precise. If you logged into Marvel Snap whilst the bug was ongoing, then you will get 500 gold.
And you have caches available. If you're under like 500 collection level, you don't get it.
Right. So a lot of I'm kind of like, so I have a couple of thoughts on this. So one, like, it's good that they're giving something for everyone. And 500 gold is like, gold's kind of fallen in value a little bit. Even Marvel Snap
It's a
is
little
not
bit more
immune to
cosmetic
inflation.
focused currency than it used to be.
But
I
it
feel
is a
like.
bit, it does feel a bit bad that, it's like, you see these things come up and like, right away you're like, how can I min max this situation so that I can get slightly ahead? And I hate to keep beating the dead horse. Well, it's dead, but I'll do it again. The reason that people think this way is because min-maxing in Marvel Snap is so important because the cost is so high for the average person that if you could even squeeze a little bit more out of the game, than you should, you're going to, because it is a Gucci premium product.
Yeah, it's
So
like when Spotlights first came out and people did the double dipping thing. And there are a lot of people I know who are like, "Oh man, I really missed out. I didn't know this was a thing." And I think things like that kind of instill that mentality a bit, where it's like I feel strapped on resources. So I wanted to, like, if there's a chance you can get something for free, people are gonna try and go for it, which I don't think is very surprising. The bug was really weird though, because it wasn't so black and white in terms of like who was bugged and who wasn't, and nobody knew the reason for the bug. Also, when it was happening, that was found out like afterwards. So like it, nobody really knew. Um, like if they were, I mean, I guess if you saw in the spotlights they were displaying the wrong thing, you knew you were bugged. But like it was kind of a mystery. So there's no guarantee. So it puts people in a weird position, but I don't think there's really much you can like do about that, where it's like because you have to compensate the people correctly, right? And I think in general the compensation is what it should have been, like letting the people who had an issue keep the things they got, like getting the keys back, because it was pretty bad for people having to open 4 and then they don't get the new card, or they don't get the one thing they wanted. That's a pretty feels bad
Oh man,
experience.
opening 4 and not getting the card is terrible.
Yeah, and you're getting like a premium mystery variant or whatever,
Opening
and it's
4 and getting the card is
that's
terrible.
already bad enough.
So
yeah, but it was just an interesting situation. Now, I have heard, I don't know if there's been an update on this. I assume there hasn't, because like it's the weekend, so they're probably not like actively working on it. I think there have been a small group of people that have fallen through the cracks, where compensation did go out to like the majority of people, but I know a handful of players who like had the same issue, but it didn't get resolved by the compensation. So if you happen to be one of those people, I think they are aware and working on that. But the compensation went out on Friday. So I imagine rectifying that issue will probably be something maybe we see in the coming week. But I know at least a few people who they had the bug happen, and they did not get the key refund yet. So
did they distribute the gold yet? I don't think they did.
no,
don't
they
think
said
so.
gold will be within the next week. So
Okay,
sometime
all
this week, the gold should go out to everybody.
Understood. All right, that's good to know. I didn't know that. That kind of, it's funny that I didn't know that, considering how invested I am, and plugged into the different like social media platforms like Twitter and Discord, whereby if you're not plugged in, you would have no idea
The
what.
funny thing is they finally did something I've been asking them to do for a long time, is they actually put it in game, the thing with the spotlight. Like so often
Only on mobile.
it's usually, oh really, only on mobile, so not on PC. I guess that's true.
Yeah.
But it's a step up, because
Sure.
I think there are a lot of things that get shared. Like the Discord's a really great resource, but the most popular videos I do on YouTube are like news videos. And the most common comment I get on these news videos is people being really happy for them because they aren't able to like keep up with and comb the Discord all the time.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, for me, it's great. It works out great for me. But I think in general, they could learn something from that and like use the news tab a bit more aggressively in the game. Because I think there's a lot of good news that gets shared over there that you don't see posted in the game or on Twitter or on other more active platforms, or just platforms where more people are. And I think that leaves like a lot of people in the dark a bit. So maybe when they get the community manager, that will improve a bit. Because I imagine that would be
reason is because when they
part of
send
their
something
job.
out in game, they have to localize it to all the different languages, whereas
Yeah, that's
Discord's English only.
understandable.
But I think that people would rather like get an English only update than no update. But I mean, I don't.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure it's more complicated of an issue than it seems, but that has been one piece of like feedback I've seen from people a lot, is that they would like some of this communication to be like available outside of the Discord, because not everyone has the Discord. Also, some people get banned from the Discord. I don't think anyone really thinks about that, but like, let's say you're having a rough day and you get in an argument with another random person in the Discord and you eat a ban. Well, now you're out of luck if you want to find out what's going on with updates to the game, and that seems like not the best system to
No.
me.
Well, yeah, and I have not had any personal experience with that, but they do seem pretty aggressive with the bans, but probably for good reason.
Yeah, I
very
mean, I have no
community.
yeah, I have no I do not envy having to moderate a place with so many. They have a lot of people.
Strong personalities, yeah.
Yeah, it's not an easy job, I'm sure. But yeah, it would be nice if some of this stuff could be just in a more open space, because it just benefits kind of the players to have access to the information more easily.
Yeah.
And it benefits the company too, right? Because the company, like Secondary, wants people to know this information, right? Like they want people to know when like something is happening in the game.
Or do they?
Or do they? Find out next time.
So before we go, I'm just gonna take one last look at that Jeff variant, because this is like my last chance to get it, and you kind of talked me into it, Zombies.
Oh, really?
It's pretty nice, actually.
It's cute. I like it, but I've hit that point, and I'd be curious to hear your guys' opinions on this too. Like, I've played the game a long time. I have spent a good amount of money on the game. I like cosmetics. I've hit this point where I feel like I've kind of stagnated on wanting much more in terms of like the cosmetic side. I mean, if there's a new card and it has a new variant that looks cool, sure. But like, in terms of getting variants for cards I have already owned, it's become very rare for me to it's been very rare for me to actually like want a new variant, because they've just put out so many good ones over time. I have one or two that I'm very happy with, and I don't feel as like inclined to get another one when maybe I still wish they would do the randomized feature where you could just randomly shuffle through them.
Right.
I feel like that's leaving money on the table. Like I have like 5 Star Lords. Like the one day a month I use Star Lord, it would be cool if it could just pick one.
We'll be happy when they finally do that character mastery, right?
Oh, I did want to mention one other thing I kind of forgot about. So we got the patch with those changes and all that stuff. But one thing that they put in the patch notes but then removed was another thing that they are adding to the card customization. And then they later clarified that is actually coming in the next patch, which is slated for like the end of this month. And this is a feature I think a lot of people are going to be happy about.
Yeah.
It is the ability to put any split you have gotten on one variant for any other variant of that card. So people were a little confused because it was in the notes and then they couldn't do it, and then they removed it from the notes and clarified.
Wait, so if I have a rainbow crackle on my art germ Loki, I'll be able to rainbow crackle like my Greki Loki?
Yeah, as long as it's the same like background and whatever, you can put any one split you've gotten on one variant on any other variant for that card.
So if I have a gold split with a white crackle on Jeff, and I get this new Kaiju Jeff, I'll be able to put the gold background and the white crack. Oh, that's actually really awesome. So
yeah,
you only really need to like.
I really hope that it works like that.
That's how it was explained, I think, in the notes. Which one thing I definitely will give some credit for is when they initially announced card customization, it sounded very basic and like it wasn't actually going to be very much customization. But as it has come out and as the feature has developed more, it seems they're leaning into that a lot more than they seemed like they were going to initially.
But people aren't gonna have to chase splits anymore like crazy.
Well, you
That's
still have to get your one god
Yeah,
split, and
I
it has to be
guess.
the right god split. But this is, I think, a very good change for the game. Like, I think this is going to be a really, because I think the goal of this is to have people go for splits on more cards rather than
Right.
splitting
Yeah.
the same card 80 times or whatever. You split it 15 times, you get the one you want, you move on to the next card. And in that same vein, the change to fast upgrade is also, I think, one of the best
Oh
changes they've
yeah,
done.
that was amazing.
So I wanted to mention
Yeah.
that really quick. Fast upgrade used to be a waste of credits. It would charge you a little bit more credits to get you boosters immediately to upgrade a card. And now in the fast upgrade section, it just charges you what it would normally charge you to upgrade the card and gives you the boosters you're missing for free. And that's been awesome because that has let
Yeah.
me upgrade like War Machine and Pixie and these cards I like but haven't played enough to get enough boosters.
I
And it's great. It's a really
yeah,
nice upgrade.
I used fast upgrade when it was like before they changed it because I would never spend like gold
Mhm.
on splits, but like if
Few
it
extra
appeared
credits here or there.
yeah,
It's
if it
not that
appeared in
big
my
of a
fast
deal.
upgrade, I'd do it because like when I have to split Hitmonkey 20 times, like, it's hard to get the boosters. So like if like I'd get like a free like infinity split with no boosters and it costs like marginally more credits, it was worth it. But now it's all
Now it's
upside.
objectively like, yeah, all upside. And there is a way you can make this target a card, which I haven't seen a bunch of people talk about, but there
Hmm.
is a way you can make the system target a card you want. And the way to do that is you need to have enough boosters to upgrade every other card. Which sounds like it is hard to do, but there are very few cards I have that I am actually lacking boosters to upgrade. There's just a handful of the new cards, I guess. But if you have enough boosters to upgrade a card, even if it's just you need, it's the first level, as long as you have more than enough boosters to upgrade it to the next level, it doesn't show up in that pool. So what you can do, and I have seen a person or two do this, they get it so all their cards have enough boosters to at least upgrade it, except for the one card they want to keep splitting. And then that one will be guaranteed to show up there. The only downside is, I bet they'll probably change this over time. Currently, it seems like it's random which variant it selects.
Yeah, I've
Like the
noticed
War
that.
Machine, it selected my variant for it, and then the next 2 days it selected the normal one. I did see someone saying by having them on like where you can split it, but you haven't actually split the button yet, I think that takes it out of the pool.
It doesn't because
It doesn't
it keeps putting my rainbow crackle lockjaws in there
even,
to
but
upgrade.
does it show it on the infinity split? Because it shouldn't if it's at infinity split.
No, I have them at red border.
Yeah, so I think you have to have the card at infinite, but you haven't pressed the split button, is I think how
I
you
see.
avoid
So
that.
I guess I would should just upgrade this one now because like it doesn't matter if it's like infinity border. I could put it back down to red if I want it.
Yeah, but it's kind of a niche thing, but I'm sure there
Oh
are
no,
at least a few
I'm
people
trying to
out
get
there.
a good kitty split. So I want kitty in
So
there
yeah,
every
that's how
time.
you would do it. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
it's probably not that hard to do it. You just have to like go through your collection and see.
So I looked at that Jeff and I kind of like it and I'd get it maybe for the avatar, but I'm not gonna waste keys on it. The Peach Momoko Venomized one is so awesome.
It
Like I
is really
actually
good.
would use that one. I have the Rian one, so like I'll just get the Peach Momoko one. If I can put a gold white crackle on it day one, then fucking let her
I
rip,
think
right?
that's also part of why they're going to be adding that feature is because it makes new variants a little bit more appealing. Because if you already
Yeah,
have a split you like on a variant,
yeah.
you have to chase a whole new one. That's gotten a little bit better, but once that feature comes, it's going to make it a lot better for just making use out of your splits, which is great. I think that's a there definitely were some pretty positive things added and coming up hopefully in next patch. So that
Yeah, some
is
nice
nice silver lining.
nice quality of life changes there. So I guess this patch wasn't all bad. I'm a big fan
Oh, we should
of
also mention the performance thing briefly,
oh
because
yeah,
some people might not know about that. There was really bad performance
it's
when it
still
came
bad.
out.
Like on
Um,
mobile, when I play a game and I finish a match, like the screen starts to flicker and like it's just yeah.
yeah, there's definitely stuff they have to work out on it. But the reason for the super bad performance was the game apparently having to re-download all the assets. And I don't know if it does that by default or if you have to go into the settings and press the button. I had to go in and press the button, and it took a long time to download. It took like 20 or 30 minutes before it
On
finished
PC or mobile?
on mobile. PC doesn't have the issue. It's just mobile. Um,
Oh, weird, because it doesn't actually tell you like when you click on it, like,
There's a little bar at the bottom that is
oh,
almost
is there?
impossible to see. I did
Oh,
not
well, yeah,
notice
there you
it.
go. I
Like,
don't see
it's
Oh,
shit, so.
snap.
a person with better vision than me probably would not see it. It is so not noticeable. Um, I was surprised when someone pointed it out to me that it was there. But yeah, if you're having super bad performance issues, you should try and go into the settings and download all the assets and give it a little bit of time, because it was by far the worst performance issues I've ever experienced on the game. And
Yeah.
there still definitely are some issues, but like not to the level of how it was when when I downloaded the patch, because the collection screen was like actually unplayable. Like I recorded a little like phone video of it, and it was really really bad. So yeah, that was not great, but it's mostly ironed out by the thing. But like Blue said, there are still, I think,
And then there's
some issues.
the infamous end turn bug.
Oh yeah, that's so I didn't realize how many people that was affecting. Like I haven't have you guys had this happen to you yet? I haven't had
Oh
it
yeah.
happen.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you explain it? What
So the turn, like the game just locks you out of being able to press the end turn button. Does it lock you out of being able to play your cards too?
No,
Uh
just pressing end turn.
just pressing end turn. And what happens is if you don't press end turn, it takes like you're roping out, and then it'll eventually auto concede for you because it thinks you're not there. And I think the only way to fix it is to force close your game and reconnect. That's what
Yep.
I've been told.
Yep.
But it's been a pretty big issue. Like I had someone in chat say the game has been kind of unplayable for them because it happens to them almost every game. And that's crazy. Like I knew of this bug. I did not know it was affecting some people so often. Because that's a pretty game breaking bug. Like that's gonna really hamper your experience if you're having to deal with that a lot. I don't know if I've had it happen to me once yet. I don't know what causes it. They did acknowledge it like finally a few days ago, and they said they're working on a hot fix for it. But I don't think that has been released yet. But they are aware of the issue, and if you're wondering about it, that now you know that's how you fix it. That's the bug. I don't think anyone knows what causes it, though. It seems very
Random.
random.
Yeah, like Safety Blade gets hit by it a lot more than I
Yeah,
have.
he's talked
It
about that
has
a bunch.
happened to me, and it happened to Interrobang last night on stream. So it's
Oh,
happening to
really?
everyone. Yeah, it's just I don't know. It seems like the client has been taking a hit with every successive patch. So I imagine that at some point they're gonna have to do a
Deal with the tech debt,
yeah,
right?
they're gonna have to have a few stories or epics in their sprint planning to work out some of the issues. But I hope that they can, because like honestly, like Snap's the only card game that it's playable on mobile. Like even like I was at the hospital for about 6 hours on Friday. I'm totally fine. I was just taking a friend for day surgery and taking them home.
Mhm.
And I had my phone, my iPad with me, and I was playing Snap and Magic the Gathering, and like Magic the Gathering is like not great on mobile, even on tablet. It chews through your battery like no one's business. and Snap just plays better on mobile, even with all the problems. So I hope they don't rest on their laurels, because I would hate to have all my card games be unplayable on mobile.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely far and away the best mobile card game experience because they focused on it, right? Like a lot of the other card games, mobile was more of an afterthought, and like it works. You can play Magic or you can play Hearthstone or Yu-Gi-Oh or whatever on mobile, but the experience is definably like worse because that's not what it was designed for. They just found a way to make it work.
Yeah.
It was an afterthought. Whereas Snap, I mean, the PC side was more of the afterthought. They eventually made it quite good, but the mobile, it was mobile first and foremost, and it's definitely a strength. But yeah, hopefully they can iron out. They did slightly improve the opening of caches, so that's
Oh, did
nice.
they? Okay,
Yeah, it
there you
doesn't
go.
take like 8 seconds anymore. Now it takes less, so that's nice because that was also annoying. How long it? Because you remember like it used to be like instant getting
Oh
stuff
yeah,
off the
you remember
collection track.
when I opened all my caches on stream there? It took freaking forever.
Yeah, it reminded me of opening like Hearthstone packs way back where you'd spend like an hour or 2 hours.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You don't open them like me. Problem solved. There you go, Price 68.
Yeah,
You've got it. You've got it figured out.
that's the meta.
That's what I did for a long time. I just gave up. So yeah, pretty eventful week. You know, I think that, like, game wise, we'll see how this meta develops. I think that it's still very much in flux. I've pretty much become a one-trick low-key gamer. But I have been dabbling on another deck of late, this Patriot deck that it runs Pixie, that kind of got bounced around on Twitter. KM just had KMS just did a YouTube video with the creator where they did a bit of a deep dive with the deck, and it's a pretty cool deck. It's kind of a bit different. I just don't think I think it's reasonable. I don't think it's top tier. I feel like there's very little choice right now when you're going top tier, because you're either basically playing a go over the top point slam deck, or you're gonna have to start hard targeting those decks running tech cards. And tech card decks are not as good anymore because a lot of them, kind of had Zabu anchoring them. So, like,
Yeah,
going
tech
back to the
card decks definitely took a hit. I think
yeah,
it's
so going back to, like, the comment about, like, it opens up space. It opens up space for what? For Hella, for Tribunal, for Negative? Like, I don't know. Probably won't last, but we'll see. And in 2 weeks, we'll certainly share our thoughts on how things kind of went. Yeah, what have you guys been playing? Patriot and Loki for me. I know, Nate, you're still doing your climb, and we might actually stay on after, since it's early, and jam some games.
Yeah, I've been doing mostly. I tried experimenting with a few things, but I've done the most of my climb with the Phoenix Force actually, and it's been really fun. There's a lot of nuance to that deck, and it's a very off meta, but it can be good into certain things. And when Baron Zemo came out, I tried to play that like kind of mill deck that was going around, or create one, or and it's okay, and it's hilarious when you like.
It's really fun. Zemo has to get the award for like card I thought would be like really mediocre, but like actually is pretty decent and way more fun than I thought he'd be. I didn't think he would be as fun as he is. I like Zemo quite a bit.
It's there's the card is pretty good, especially if you play it late game and you pull their
you can get some big stuff.
Pull their Red Hulk or whatever. It's pretty funny. I learned the hard way with, I think it was somebody played Pixie, and that totally
takes their cheap Pixie stuff.
It totally goofs up the Zemo. Yeah, Zemo Pixie is an interesting interaction because all the card things change, so you don't know what you're gonna end up with. But yeah, the mill decks are kind of fun, but I don't know how viable. Like, it was super fun, but it was kind of hit and miss. But I had a lot of people conceding because you just pull all their stuff.
Yeah, you usually don't get to the final turn because people realize they don't have a chance. Like, I think the best version of those decks have been the ones that include Magic, because the extra turn I think matters quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
It's also just good with Zemo. And you don't care if there's an extra turn as much if you're making it so they have less cards to draw.
Yeah.
And then Doc Ock has been a mainstay there because you just yoink their stuff onto the field. You clear that lane with like a Shang or a Shadow King or just by outpowering it. And then you win the other lane with your own big Red Hulk a lot of the time, or a Shang or what have you. It was really, really popular for like the first week. Popularity's died down a bit now.
Kind of glad because it's really annoying.
Yeah, it's one of those decks where when it's everywhere, I think it gets kind of annoying, and also the mirrors get really silly because
Oh,
you're both
gosh.
trying to do like the same thing, so it comes down to more like luck of like who drew what and did my cable snipe their key card, and so that gets a
Yeah.
little dumb. But mirrors usually get kind of dumb in card games like that, so that's not super surprising. But
yeah, I played a
good
lot of
season
that.
pass card, like it's rare for a season pass card to make like an archetype, you know? And I feel like Zemo kind of did that. Like mill decks were not a thing before Baron Zemo, or at least not an effective thing.
Right.
And they're definitely playable now. So that's cool because I think the more archetypes you can get in the game, the better. And generally the card release cycle makes it harder to do that in this game. So that was kind of nice to see.
Yeah. That and Phoenix Force has been really fun. That's probably what I'll play. I took it to rank 90.
It's good.
And
Good deck.
It's a little bit draw reliant, but there's a
couple...
it's
super draw reliant.
I mean,
you have a backup plan,
but
so
it's got the backup plan like the Shuri into Nimrod into destroy stuff. So it's been fine. You just have to know like when you don't got it, like get out.
Yeah. I think that's one of the reasons it's probably good for climbing, if you can capitalize on the early snaps when you have it, and when it's obvious when you don't have it, so you just get out.
Yeah.
Definitely makes it a little easier. But yeah, I think that deck is pretty well positioned in the environment right now. It's solid.
Yeah, it's if you like that kind of game plan, it's certainly good, and of the combo points decks, it's probably the most resilient to Loki, which despite having very middling stats, has a pretty reasonable rate of play, at least at the top of ladder. Once you kind of get out of the top 10% of ladder or below like rank 5,000, Loki starts to drop off.
Yeah, he falls off a cliff.
Yeah.
I wanna bring up something that I've said before that I think will be relevant to, like, there's a lot of frustration around Hela right now. A lot of people dislike Hela. A lot of people are asking why are they nerfing Hela. And I think Hela is on the opposite side of the Loki coin. And I think they are both cards that do kind of unhealthy things when they are good, or like strong enough to be good. But the negativity of that experience, I think, is weighted more towards the very top end of the player base. And I don't think the stats back up across like the larger player base that these cards are so problematic in what they're doing that they need to be adjusted. So it's like, if you're playing in the higher ranks, you're going to see people playing these more, and it ends up being more frustrating. I have seen so many, specifically about Hela, because people feel like there's not a lot you can interact with Hela, which is generally kind of true. It is kind of a solitaire deck where your options to stop it are limited.
I mean, I don't want to actually you, but you might be interested to hear this. Oh, actually, ZombiesGoNomNom. So I'm checking right now, rank 70 to 99, as of an hour ago. So Loki, just to compare, has it's still pretty good, although remember there are bots below 100. 53.5% win rate with a 3.9% play rate. Hela has a 54.6% win rate with a 6.5% play rate.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because
so
the difference between those two is that Loki is more susceptible to user error than Hela is. There are tons of plays you can mess up with Loki. Hela is really hard to mess up. Like it's somehow I've seen people do it. It's not impossible, but Hela is very difficult to, like, once you've played it a few times, you kind of get it. and it's not like you're having like these like deep decisions you have to make every game. Whereas Loki, it's a little different every time, right? Like you have to identify, is this a game where I Loki or where I don't Loki? If I do Loki, did I get the cards I need? How do I use these cards most effectively? There's a lot more room for error. So like more so, the reason I'm saying they're the same, they're like the opposite sides of the same coin, is that I think they both impact like higher level play in what many players perceive to be a negative experience, but I don't think they impact the larger game enough for the developers to actually want to change those cards, because I think they want those cards to be playable by the larger player base. And if they change them because they're like doing a bit better at the top, that makes them even worse lower down. So like, I mean, it's a well-known fact. I am an avid Loki hater. If you let me pick one card to delete from the game, I know which green card I'm picking.
No,
but
they've already deleted all the other cards I like from the game. Like, let me have this one. Come on.
That's why I think you're in luck, Blue, because they're not going to. I am firmly on the position of I will be very surprised if anytime soon either Loki or Hela take a significant hit, unless a card comes out that significantly boosts the popularity and the performance of those decks across all play levels. That might be Valentina, which is happening this month. But there are no good Hela cards coming this month, so she ain't going anywhere.
I don't
She's
even
gonna
know,
be
like,
with us for
honestly,
a while.
so I was gonna cut Collector for Valentina, but then I cut it for Angela, and I'm not cutting Angela for Valentina. So like the only other cards I can cut are Enchantress, and like that's it. Jeff is too good with Elsa, and I'm not running Mockingbird because I'm running Enchantress. And Cable's
I think
too good.
Mockingbird's overrated in Loki anyway.
I don't like it. I don't like it. I'd much rather run Enchantress.
It's more
But the
like a
point
zoo
is,
kind of card.
I'm not gonna cut Cable for Valentina because
No,
Cable's
Cable's
just,
the nuts. Cable's one of the
yeah,
best 2-drops in the game right now, which is
Cable
very
just
funny.
steals games. Like it's
Yeah,
amazing. So
he's
I
really,
don't
really good.
I don't even think I'm gonna play Valentina. I'll probably pick it up just because.
Well, Valentina's good because like Valentina
What do you
boosts your
cut?
not go Loki game plan. I don't know. I'd have to look at the list. You know me. I don't play much Loki.
You have to cut. You have to cut Enchantress basically.
Yeah,
or,
you probably cut one of the tech cards. That's probably
Yeah,
what you do.
I don't want to cut the tech cards. That's the
Because
point.
think about the high roll it enables. Like you can just
Maybe
you
the
can
high
curve
roll.
out into, you can go Quinjet, Valentina, 6-drop. Like that's pretty ridiculous.
I suppose. Yeah, I guess.
That's
I
like
don't.
super ridiculous. Like and a lot of those 6-drops won't be shangable because of the power reduction.
Yeah, but the thing is this, right? Like, what is that going to, like, in the matchups that I'm already like doing well into, like the mid-range decks, like Silky Smooth or Bounce, or like any of those, like I
Well, it
don't.
helps when you don't have Loki, right? I
I
think that's the big
understand,
strong
but
point of it, right?
it's not going to help me against the big go tall decks that I can't do anything about, whereas
Yeah.
Enchantress does. I don't know, but I'm the only person running Enchantress, so most people will run Rogue for that reason, which I
A
think
lot
is
of people aren't even running it anymore because Rogue was for Mobius, and most decks have cut Mobius in the last like 2 weeks.
right. So I don't know. We'll see. That's
Loki
not
doesn't
next
even
week.
run it anymore, right? Like Loki used to run Mobius. I don't think it runs it anymore, right?
No, I'm not. I'm basically running the last one that Safety Blade posted, -1 card. Although we talked about it together, I'm doing the Kitty, Angela, Elsa, Jeff, Shang, Enchantress, Cable, Loki.
Yeah, the kitty stuff is the way to play.
Yeah,
Loki, it's
Hope.
just very good.
Some people don't run Hope. I think that's crazy. So
They probably don't have her.
it's very tight. The list is very tight. So the only real flexes are Jeff and Enchantress, I think, or if you're running Mockingbird. But I don't
It's
think you
hard.
want
It's getting
to Jeff.
harder to fit new
It'll be worth
cards into some of these
experimenting
decks.
with Valentina. I mean, I'm gonna get it. I'm gonna experiment with it. I'll get my little 200 token like refund, and then just from that weekend, I'll know if it's worth or not. It might be the nuts. It might be okay. It really It really depends. Although I think that's probably the deck it sees play in. Yeah, I mean, maybe
it might just be a decent mid-range card, kind of like Cable is. I do not think they should have buffed it to a 2/3. I think that was a weird decision.
Yeah, if they
it was a 2/2 before.
If they revert Cable, then probably then it becomes like, well, do you run Mirage or do you run Valentina? And probably Valentina.
Like, why is
guess,
Mirage a 2/2 and Cable's a 2/3 and Valentina's a 2/3? Like, I don't know, just like pick. Like, either make them all 2/3s or make them all 2/2s. Like,
Mirage
it's so
gives you
weird.
extra stats, I guess. I don't. I like, honestly, go figure out what they're thinking at the best of time. I can't. And by the way, for all of my detractors that are disappointed to hear that I'm playing Loki, they killed my climbing deck, Infinite, High Evo Infinite. I mean, it's still playable, but like that whole deck was basically built around Leech. Like, that's the only reason I played it, because it just gave such inevitability on the ladder climb. It could steal 8 from bots. And it was really good at taking 2 off people when you snapped into Leech and you had a favorable circumstance. Now you don't have that anymore. So I played Loki, and I tried a few other decks, and Loki did pretty well into bots. I could juice them for 4/8, but it was just good into just everything that I just saw. Like, it's just like a good random jank like deck, because then I'll just get all your jank and I'll just play it better. Yeah, I'm gonna pick Valentina up. I'll try it out in the Enchantress slot or the Jeff slot, and we'll see what happens. It's good enough to get. I think it's one of the more interesting cards this month, and it goes into a deck that I like. There's no good variant for it though, and that's kind of another knock against it. Right?
Yep.
Like, yeah.
It's silly, but it's true. Well, yeah, Valentina is the only other one other than US Agent that doesn't get a variant this month.
Yeah, and
outside of the spotlight, but
y'all saw that Enchantress that I got the other day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Inked Enchantress with a purple crackle. And
That's
now that you're saying I can use that on, well, if they make it that I can use it on any card, that's sick, because I've got the 15, I don't remember the year, the really cool Enchantress.
The 1602, yeah.
1602. Yeah. That one's freaking amazing. And
I finally got that one.
Oh, nice. Yeah, there's a Peach Momoko one that's coming out too. I just really like Enchantress. The reason I like Enchantress more than Rogue is because, yes, Rogue is like probably better, but like, when you
I don't think Rogue's better anymore. She was better. Like,
well, we gave it's Mobius, but like, even against Mobius, like,
Miss Marvel is the big one, I think.
Yeah, that too. The body sucks, right? The body sucks. And at least with like Enchantress being a 4 or 5, like, you can play it on turn 3 or turn 4 just as like a tempo body, and it's like not the worst thing in the world. But yeah, maybe this is just better, because now like it becomes a better tempo body. I don't know. I'll have to try it. I'm rambling. But this is the deck that I've been forced to play because they killed Evo, they killed Lockjaw, right? Yeah, you could still play it in Thanos, but whatever. They killed.
But that's playing Thanos.
They didn't kill Sarah, but Sarah's just not good into the meta, because Sarah's not good into these decks that like.
Sarah's worse Loki.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what Sarah is now, especially after Zabu.
And it's just worse Loki, because you don't have an answer in Sarah to the decks that like Silky
don't
Smooth,
fold
like
your
they
attack.
go all right to like the Shang limit, and they go tall enough that you don't have the points to easily compete with them. So Loki, you just take all their move cards, just make them cheaper and play them better than them. It's just a better game plan that kind of follows the same play pattern, which kind of sucks, because I generally like Sarah better.
Yeah, I feel that. I was a big Sarah fan, and it's very hard to justify playing at least traditional control Sarah. There are decks that are running Sarah, namely like a Combo Surfer and like a Mockingbird Surfer.
Tribunal, like whatever. But yeah, it's not like, we're talking about like the classic like Sarah, that threw Prio and then either teched their way out on 6 or did like, Monkey and Bishop things, or used to run Nova and Mysterio and Killmonger. Anyways, there were lots of different ways of doing it. Those just don't really seem worth it. Loki just does
Especially
that.
with the Zabu nerf. The Zabu nerf was just like the final nail in the coffin for the Sarah deck.
Yeah, like the control
like there's
Sarah
just no
the
chance.
Revis one with the Legion on the top. That always seemed like it was a fine choice. You know, it always would post numbers, and now like it's fallen off a cliff.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I got nothing. I'm playing that Patriot list, and I'm playing Loki, and honestly, like I've been taking this little lull to play other games. I have been playing Balatro, which is amazing. I've been playing some Magic the Gathering and Timeless, which is fun, but almost as uneconomic as playing Snap. And I've been playing Loop Hero. Loop Hero is another fun little game.
I
So
feel like I've
yeah,
heard of that one before.
been branching out a little bit. Oh yeah, and I'm still playing Star Rail. I mean, that's kind of like, so you know, lots of gaming going on. But yeah, you know, I didn't hit Infinite on day one, but I still did it. Like, when did I? Yeah, last weekend. So I hit it before the first week was up, and I took it pretty casually, and you know, it's still the coziest climb in any card game. So I'm grateful for that. At
Well,
least
it
you hit
depends where
bots.
you're at. It has not a universal experience.
Well,
In fact,
when do the bots stop coming in 90 on the ladder?
well,
Because I'm not exactly like
here's the thing.
high up on the ladder, right?
I think you're higher than you think you are on ladder as far as that goes. Because I've heard from a lot of people who are more casual players, they feel like the climb has gotten harder over time.
Oh, I've co-opted with Lee. Like Lee doesn't get a single bot after 80.
Yeah, so I
And
think our experiences are a little different than the average bear, because you get more, like we get more bots. The game gives us more bots to segment us out of the general population.
but not to like, I don't mean this in a derogatory way, Nate, but you've probably the lowest snap points out of all of us.
Oh,
Like,
for sure. It's
what
because
was your snap points total at the end of last season?
Oh gosh, I don't remember. I play
Was
super
it like
casually though.
Yeah. So
And
that's what I say is
so
because you're like in the like high 6,000s, and you still get bots. So like, where does the bot cutoff go? Like,
I don't know the specifics, but I do know I have seen a lot where it's like the people will definitely have, like, people have a fall off of bots a lot, like 80s or specifically 90, that I don't have that experience.
I'll tell you what, if I didn't have a cozy climb, I wouldn't do it. Like, it's not like it's not, maybe I would. I don't want to say definitively, but like I've got nothing to prove
We're
at this
still
point.
scarred
Like,
from the Zabu season.
yeah,
climb.
like,
We'll
I mean,
never forget that Zabu season climb.
I hit Infinite every month, but like, honestly, like, who cares? Like, I understand that some people really struggle for it, and it's a big achievement. And I'm not trying to take away from it, but I'm talking about like when you do it every month and you're in that segment where it's like cozy, like it's not really
You're just going through the motions. It's not, you don't have to think
yeah.
about it a lot, and that's why I think it has to get frustrating as a player who doesn't fall into that bracket sometimes, because you see people posting like day one Infinite, and
Oh yeah.
people who do it, myself included, will be the first ones to say like, yeah, if the game wasn't giving me bots every so many games, this would be way harder and like not nearly as like consistent or possible. And it's like, it's just not something within our control, but that can be kind of frustrating for players who aren't getting the bots, and they're like, why am I not getting the bots? Because they're having more, like, they have a harder climb because you have more real games of Marvel Snap, and also not just because of less bots, but when you play players who are at sometimes a lower relative skill level, people make really weird decisions that is really hard to account for. Like, that's why, and you can see this in like any card game, where if you have someone who's very, very good at the game and they play someone who is very not great at the game, let's say, they're going to be like thinking with a mindset that they're used to playing against other very good players. So sometimes a less good player can get an advantage because they do something that someone is not used to, isn't accounting for. They'll take a scenario that gives them a 25% chance to win when, someone who's better might not. Or
Elo
they'll make a
hell.
play that doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah.
To most people, but it somehow wins them the game. And you can't kick yourself for not playing around that, because if you start playing around a nonsensical play, it's probably going to hurt you more over time than help you. But it sucks in the moment when you lose to something like that. And so it's important to remember not all climbs are created equal, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So
No,
don't let
definitely.
it discourage you if you're having a harder time, because the game is hard at times when you're facing
And
nothing but real
people
people.
play real tight in the 90s too, so it feels like you're on a treadmill. Or at
Yeah.
least that was my experience before I got put on easy street. Well, we're just about hitting the 2-hour mark there. Did you guys have any other topics that you wanted to talk about before we wrap and switch over to some Nate Wolf gameplay?
We talked about Thanos last time, right? I it's hard for me to remember. Like
I believe we did. I mean,
okay.
honestly, I have an even worse memory than you zombies.
I've seen
Yeah.
very little of it after the change, by the way. Like,
Yeah. Oh, I just wanted to mention, like, I think we did talk about it last time, right as the nerf happened, I want to say. But it's interesting. I have to say, at least for the time being, it's crazy how much more enjoyable the game became to play after they essentially gave Thanos a little bit of that temporary rotation energy. Oh, yes. And we get to show Nate's picture. Oh, this is great.
Yeah.
This is great.
Well, it was your idea. I mean, I just
but you
implemented it.
made it reality.
Thanos has, like, the play rate has completely cratered. The win rate still looks pretty good. It's pretty hard carried by Mockingbird.
But the thing with Thanos now is when you draw bad, oh god, it's got to be like the worst feeling in the game when you draw bad with Thanos. You just don't get to play any cards. It's really rough. So yeah, Thanos is now Quicksilver. He's always starting in your hand.
Yeah, it's so funny.
It's quite funny. But I do think old Thanos really was putting just a very negative like chokehold on the game, and specifically like releasing cards. Like Mockingbird probably still like overly pushed, but I don't see anyone complaining about Mockingbird anymore, because now you actually have to like dedicate building a deck around the card rather than just getting her for free because you're playing Thanos. And like that's cool. It's neat to have a thing that makes you want to run Shauna or Squirrel Girl or Mysterio or whatever. Like that's neat. That's kind of what you want in a card game.
Yeah.
So I'm hopeful for all the Thanos enjoyers that they do eventually find like a good rework for the card to make it like, I love the idea of making Thanos more about Thanos. It was always kind of silly to me how the stones are why you played it and not like the Mad Titan himself. Like it was cool when you got 20 power Thanos that happened one every 100 games, but it's not why you were putting the card in your deck.
I don't know. I like old Thanos better, and I feel like Thanos became overbearing not because Thanos is overbearing, but because the support they gave Thanos was absolutely ridiculous. So it's kind of like,
well, that's
I
the thing is I don't think they wanted a lot of these cards to be Thanos cards, and then it turned out that Thanos just used them better than the decks they actually wanted the cards to be played in. And like, because they kind of, I feel like they kind of said that in the notes where they were like, yeah, we don't really like how Thanos is using like every new card when we're not trying. They aren't necessarily trying to design every new card for Thanos. But I'm curious to see what they do with the eventual rework to Thanos, because it would be really cool if the deck was about like he starts in your hand, so you're always going to have him. It would be cool if it, actually felt like you were powering up Thanos by using the stones. Like that's a fun like element of the character. It's very thematic, and I think it would be interesting. I think the most interesting version of Thanos will always be like old school Thanos. But I think part of the reason old school Thanos was interesting was because it felt like a puzzle. And the reason it felt like a puzzle was because you didn't get to run like 11 other like perfectly amazing cards. Like Thanos, because of the draw consistency issues, always felt a little bit different in the beginning. And as he got better cards over time, it feel like it got homogenized into generally I'm just a ramp deck that sometimes will Shang-Chi or threat. Which that right? Isn't that what Thanos became? Like he became the best ramp deck that also could run a reactive tool.
Yeah, and it ran Mobius too, so yeah.
Yeah, it just became very not fun. And funnily enough, even though there's more draw RNG in Thanos, a lot of the Thanos games really felt similar or the same. It didn't feel like I was having like a dynamic experience playing against Thanos. Whereas early on in Thanos' days, it really did feel that way. It felt like a whole different card to me. I remember playing with Thanos right after he came out because I opened him, and God, he was so bad at the start. He was really not good, but he sure was fun. I had a lot of fun playing Thanos. But yeah, hopefully, I'm hoping it doesn't take them forever to actually like figure out what they want to do with it. But that is anyone's guess as to how long it takes for them to figure out what designs they want to do with making Thanos more interesting. And well, after him dominating the game for like 4 months, I don't think anyone's going to be too sad if it takes them a little bit of time.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds like a good enough place to end on. I want to thank you both for indulging me on the flexible podcast schedule time. And yeah, I think that we're not through with this patch. We'll see how it develops, and we'll be back in approximately 2 weeks' time with our flexible schedule to let you know how it all shapes up and our thoughts on the cards being released for the rest of the month. This is a 5-week month, by the way, so there's still 3 weeks left in it. So if you're trying to hit infinite or grind some metals, you got a little bit of extra time this month, which is nice. All right, guys. Well, thank you for listening. To those who are watching us live, appreciate you being here, and we'll be continuing on for a little bit of gameplay with Nate. If you're watching on YouTube or listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, thank you so much for supporting us. We always enjoy talking about the game, but we also enjoy that you guys are able to share our thoughts with us and wherever you're consuming this from. So thank you so much, and we'll be back. And until next time, remember to keep it Cosmo.
Keep it Cosmo.
Keep it Cosmo.
Enough said, bub.